Welcome to episode 22, Diva Family. It's been over a year since I launched the podcast, and while I'm quite proud of the 21 episodes that we've created, I have to come clean that I've been dragging my feet when it comes to actually promoting the podcast. 3 years ago, when my guides told me to do the podcast, they didn't specify that I needed to also promote it. Of course, I knew that would be part of it, but I've used that as a bit of an excuse. And over the past year, I've just watched myself hide out. In full sight, mind you. I mean, I was doing the podcast. I was doing what my guides told me. I was passing out stickers at psychedelic events, and every so often I would post about the show on Instagram. But I knew inside all the ways that I was hiding. And yet, despite my best attempts to keep it hidden, people were listening. And all the feedback has been really positive. And I know it won't stay that way, but I am so grateful for that because it allowed me to slowly feel comfortable saying, okay, guides, I'm willing to grow this thing. But it turns out one of the things that was standing in the way of me growing the podcast was my mom, Joanne. My mom, at 95, not surprisingly, knew nothing about my psychedelic use. In fact, my mom was watching the news decades ago. It was probably some kind of cocaine drug bust on the news, and she said, I pray that drugs are wiped from the face of the earth. And I thought to myself, I pray that your prayer does not come to pass. But I did not try to argue with her about it, as I didn't really see the point. See, I've always considered myself to be the psychedelic sheep of the family. I wasn't the black sheep because I was always pretty much a good girl. I didn't get into too much trouble. I was just the one who was a little weird, a little outside of the box, a little alternative to our very normal everyday life. I've been used to questioning, disagreeing with, and challenging my parents all my life, but I never felt the need to let them in on my psychedelic use. My dad died when I was 30, and I was sure my mom would go to her grave without me sharing this particular piece of information with her, and I felt good about that choice. My mom is a chronic worrier, and for her to find out that I was doing illegal drugs would have just sent her into an unnecessary tizzy. And so when my guides recently suggested that I tell her, I once again argued with them in my psychedelic space. Why? Why would I want to distress my 95-year-old mother and then have to live with the anxious consequences of that for however long she remains on the planet? I asked. And they responded, trust us. And I was like, okie dokie. Then they said, this is how you tell her. Michael Pollan is on the Oprah podcast talking about the benefits of psychedelics. And my mom was a huge Oprah fan back in the day. So on my next visit, they said, I should sit her down and watch the YouTube video of that conversation. And then, once Oprah had given psychedelics a thumbs up and discussed how they were healing people with trauma and other issues, I could then tell her about my own use and my work as an integration coach. I could tell her about the podcast and why I thought it was important to teach people a safe, reverent, sacred use of these important medicines. And then, after that, they told me that I should take her to have lunch with Sheri Salata. Sheri is my first guest on this podcast, and she was the executive producer of the Oprah Winfrey Show for 17 years. She was a psychedelic integration coaching client of mine, and she's now a friend. And she also happens to live an hour away from my mother. So we could have lunch with Sheri, and she could share insider's knowledge about the Oprah Show, which my mom would love. And she could also share about her own personal psychedelic journeys. and the deeply soulful impact they've had on her life. Basically, I was pretty sure my mom wouldn't believe me about the power of psychedelics, but she might feel differently if she learned about them through the world of Oprah, which was a place that was, for her, respectable and trustworthy. My guides also told me that I should ask some of my family, friends, and integration clients, if they felt comfortable, to write my mom a letter telling her about their own psychedelic use and how it had positively impacted their lives. So that was the plan my guides laid out. Lead with Oprah and science and clinical research studies, then sandwich in, yes, your daughter has tried these illegal substances, then follow up with a nice lunch with Oprah's executive producer, and then complete the package with some personal testimonial stories. So I go back east to implement the reveal strategy. I queue up the Oprah and Michael Pollan interview on her TV, and we start watching. All I said was, I'd like you to watch this, and we can talk about it afterwards. Well, the beginning of that podcast has a pretty heavy focus on all the clinical trials that have been done with people who have had trauma and PTSD. And my mom, at 95, doesn't have a bladder that lasts that long. So about 20 minutes in, we stop it so she can go to the bathroom. When she comes back, she's visibly upset. And she turns to me distressed and asks, "Is there something wrong with you?" I'm like, "What do you mean, Mom?" She says, "Do you have trauma? Have you been harmed? Do you have mental illness?" And I'm like, oh, crap. That did not go as planned. I turn off Oprah and I say, "No, Mom, I'm involved in this healing work. I showed you this because I wanted you to have an understanding of the shift that has happened around these drugs out there in the world. I was trying to show you that they have medical and healing value." "So are you doing these drugs?" she asked. And I said, "Yes, I have tried them." "I don't understand why you need to do drugs," she said. And I said, "Mom, I don't need to do drugs, but I have chosen to use them for a variety of reasons. I've used them ceremonially. I've used them to gain insight and for personal growth and deeper wisdom. I've used them for community and connection." "Do you do this for fun?" she asked critically. I said, "Yes." And then I said, "Mom, you and Dad and your friends used to drink." "Sometimes too much," she interjected. And I said, "Yes, it's important to know your dose. And that's one of the things I teach people in order to keep them safe." I said, "You know, Mom, when we used to travel after Dad died, whenever you would have a drink in the evening, you were always more relaxed, less anxious, and more willing to engage on a deeper level." I said, "People use these medicines for those purposes as well, to lower their boundaries so they can connect more from their heart. And yes, if they take too much, just like with alcohol, they can get in trouble. That's why it's so important to know your body and to know your dose." Of course, the worried, anxious part of my mom went immediately to safety. I acknowledged her concerns and said, "That's why I've spent the last 40 years really learning about these medicines, so I could keep myself and my friends and my integration clients as safe as possible. I've been going to conferences and meeting elders and wisdom keepers in the community." I told her I'm actually pretty knowledgeable about the field, and I'm working really hard to help people not get harmed as they explore with these medicines. I said safety is my #1 focus. Hey, fellow explorers. Thoughtful planning and preparation is the foundation of any successful psychedelic journey. And if something does go wrong, knowing how to navigate that difficult space is essential. That's why I wrote my psychedelic safety guide, including what to do when things go wrong. It's filled with tips and tools for keeping you and your friends as safe as possible. You'll find it at our website, psychedelicdivas.com. Please, go get it, read it, and share it. The more we all know, the safer we can keep each other. Then she wanted to know, why was I telling her all this now? I told her that I'd been keeping an important aspect of myself from her most of my life, and that I didn't want to do that anymore. I told her I wanted her to know who I was before she died. I didn't want to scare her, but I didn't want to keep things from her that were important to me. She began to hear me, and her stance softened. I explained that the woman we were going to have lunch with the next day, Sheri, had also tried these medicines, and they'd had a profound impact on her life. Then she could ask Sheri questions about that if she wanted to, in addition to asking her about the Oprah show. I also showed her some of my podcast episode with Sheri on YouTube. It was a lot for her to take in. But by the end of our conversation, she actually said she was proud of me. The next day, my mom was up early, showered, and ready to go to lunch with Sheri. My sister drove us the hour south to where Sheri lives, and we sat down for a lovely lunch. Now, Sheri is from the Midwest, as is my mom, and she is a straight shooter. And she knows how to talk to a 95-year-old Midwest woman. She understood her mission. This was the Joe show. We were having this lunch from my mom to help her get comfortable with all the information I had dumped on her the day before. She told my mom some of her personal stories about the impact her psychedelic journeys had had on her life. She explained that she was not the type of person to do these things recreationally, and that she had very carefully chosen the different people she had worked with. My mom said she was just concerned about the safety, and Sheri said, me too. And she described how I had helped her prepare for the different journeys she had taken, and how she had vetted the people she worked with. Sheri was perfect. She knew just how to make a 95-year-old woman feel seen and heard, and she acknowledged her fears and helped her to see that this was important work, and that I was working to help people mitigate those risks that she was so worried about. I could see that this external seal of approval was having an impact. We ended our luncheon with some juicy, behind-the-scenes dish about guests on the Oprah show, and we headed back home. The next day, I gave her the letters that my friends and clients and family members had all written about their personal stories of healing and growth with psychedelics. They were all beautiful, poignant, vulnerable stories. Mom read the letters. She took each of them in, and then she wrote every one of them back with a personalized thank you note. In one of the notes, she said, "I didn't know all of this about Carla, and I guess that's my fault," which really touched my heart. It's been a few months now, and I've just come back from visiting my mom again. A few things have changed. Like when my husband and I went to the MAPS Psychedelic Science Conference in June, I told my mom where we were going, instead of just saying we were going to a conference. So I'm including her in on my full life and not leaving her out anymore. I did ask Mom if she wanted to be on this episode, and at first she said yes. And then she said no, because she thought she would be too negative, because she still focuses on what can go wrong. I told her that that would actually be a valuable perspective, but she still said no. My mom is always going to worry, but she seems to have accepted this new information into how she views me. And I have to say that my guides were right when they said I should trust them, that this whole reveal would be okay, and that it could actually bring me and my mom into closer connection, which was my hope. The biggest and most unexpected impact, however, was an internal shift. I mentioned at the beginning of this episode that I'd been hiding out and not really promoting this podcast. After having this conversation with my mother in April, I felt somehow released from the need to keep hiding. I felt more comfortable in my own skin. I felt ready to bring the podcast up from the shadows where I had kept it hidden. So I hired a social media team, Set and Setting Social. They're a female-focused team that specializes in psychedelic accounts to help me get my message out there. More importantly, I feel energetically released, as if I've been keeping a part of myself in the shadows all these years. It's a subtle yet powerful internal shift. So I'm grateful that my guides push me to do the hard things. I know it's for my own good, even though I still resist. But I'm getting better. I'm trusting their messages around all this. And more importantly, I'm trusting myself. People ask me all the time if I'm having fun with the podcast, and it's a complex answer. I absolutely love the hour I spend with the person I'm interviewing. That is always awesome and fun and interesting. But there's a lot around the creation of the podcast, which is time-consuming and tedious. But here's a lesson I learned around mountain biking that I'm trying to apply to the podcast. When I was in my 20s, I was just learning to mountain bike, and I wasn't very good. I used to bike this same trail in West Marin, so I knew it pretty well. And I pretty much had the same experience each time. The first part was easy and flat and fun, and then it started to get hilly. And then there was this one hill, and I was never able to fully get myself up that hill. I always had to get off and push the bike up the last part. But then one day, I decided to go mountain biking on a low dose of mushrooms. So there I was, biking the familiar path. It was a beautiful day. And then I found myself at that hill. And suddenly, I was just able to do it, almost effortlessly. I got to the top for the first time without getting off the bike, and it wasn't hard. And then on the other side, the biggest transformation happened. See, in the past, when I had gotten to the top of the hill, I had come down the other side slowly, cautiously, using my brakes. But this time, I was in flow. I wasn't worried about falling. I was in the experience. I let go of the brakes, and instead of worrying about what was right in front of the bike, I looked down the trail and trusted the bigger picture. For the first time, I found the pleasure of letting go. And I really got the pure joy of riding fast and free down the hill. In the past, the hill had just been something to get up and down. But that day I got it. That freewheeling, joyful ride down the mountain was my reward for all the hard uphill slogging. I had been missing out on the reward by braking and keeping myself safe. I remembered that lesson the other day, and I realized I've been doing the same thing with the podcast. I've been doing all the hard, slogging, uphill part that comes with putting each episode together. But when it came to really sharing it with the world, I had been applying the brakes. I hadn't let myself really put it out there because it was still too scary. It's my intention now to let go of the brakes, to really see where this podcast wants to fly. And now that I've told my mom, I don't have any energetic need to hide out anymore. I don't know where this journey's going to lead, but I can tell you that I absolutely intend to enjoy the ride. Thanks for being a part of it with me. If you want to fully participate on this expedition with me, I invite you to sign up for my newsletter at psychedelicdivas.com. In return, you'll get my psychedelic safety guide, including what to do when things go wrong. You can also find me on Instagram at Psychedelic Divas. And just to be clear, while I did just hire a social media team to help me promote the podcast, it's still my voice. If you see my name on a post, it's my words. They're just helping me make it happen. Because we all need a little help as we push out of our comfort zones. Thank you so much for listening. I so appreciate your kind and loving feedback, and I look forward to growing together. Thanks for being along the ride with me.